Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm DC. So today is March 11th, and yeah, that sort of marks a very big day for me and for many people. Yeah, back in 2011, the earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan. I was living in Japan at the time with my wife, and just 9 months later, I was diagnosed with stage 4 follicular lymphoma, and then again 2 years later. So I've been fighting that ever since, after being given months to live. But it was the start of a very long and turbulent sort of period in my life, which I am now starting to rebuild from. And you know, like I was 38 when I was diagnosed. I'm now 52 next week. So you know, it's and this is, you know, March 11 is just one of those big milestones for me. You know, we survived the 9 magnitude earthquake and then the tsunami afterwards. So I just wanted to give some people some insight and just some reflection, I guess, on the day, what it was like. And of course, I can't tell you like the whole story. You will be able to read about it very soon in my book. But you know, every March 11th, I like to just reflect on how blessed I am, how that my wife and I were safe, and our families, and also to just reflect on, you know, all the things that we lost, friends and people that we knew.
At the Sendai airport, it took only 30 seconds for water to overtake the runways. Soon after, the 16-foot airport tunnel overflowed, filling with cars, small planes, and bodies.
足が震えちゃうな、さすがに。マイク大丈夫かや。ダメだわな。マイクダメだわな。テレビ流されてるわ。Hello everyone. Today is March 11th, and it's really hard to believe that it's now been 14 years since the earthquake and tsunami, where my wife and I were living at the time, in a little town near Tagajo. It's like an outside suburb of Sendai city. It's between the coast and the city, and yeah, it's really. I'm just going through some photos. I'm looking at some old memories, you know, which I'll put up for you so you can have a look and you can see for yourself what it was like. So I just thought I'd show people what my perspective, anyway, of what it was like going through that earthquake and the tsunami afterwards. You know, I've had. I think I was actually very lucky. I managed to escape a lot of it, and you know, but you know, people that I used to know, and people that I still think about, you know, who weren't so lucky. You know, afterwards, I put together I helped put together an excursion for all the kids that lost parents and things like that. And you know, you just so many horrific stories, really horrific stories, when these natural disasters happen. Yes, people like to make people like to, I mean, there's always these hero stories as well, like these amazing stories of people that survived, but survived horrible things, and so many horrible stories come out of that day. Like when it happened, I was at home. I was sort of between. I'd been working that morning. I went to the gym, and then I was about to leave for work again. And it was about 2:45, I think it was, in the afternoon when it hit. I just thought it was just another earthquake. Like in Japan, you have earthquakes all the time. Like every 3 minutes, there is an earthquake in Japan. Every 3 minutes, right? And in fact, just 2 months before that one, there was quite a big one down on the Japan seaside, on the other side of Japan, down south. But like earthquakes usually last like 15 to 40 seconds. They're not very long. But this one was almost 6.5 minutes. It just kept going and going and going. And I was just sitting at home, and I was just I was ready to, I just finished lunch actually, and I was just about to go to work, and all of a sudden everything just started shaking, and like I knew it was big because everything was shaking quite big, but most earthquakes, it's sort of like you get rocked, side to side and that sort of stuff. But this one, it felt like it was going from all angles, like it didn't have any one direction, and everything was kind of swirling around. And the first 30 seconds, I'm thinking, okay, it'll be over in a minute. I'm just sort of bracing and trying to hold the bookcase up and make sure there's not much damage, and then it just kept going, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it fluctuated, like it started going in waves. It was it'd get really big, and then it relaxed, then it'd get really big, and just keep going. And it hit 9 magnitude more than once. And most of the time was in over 8, the 6.5 minutes. But when it, I started seeing cracks in the walls of my apartment. I was on the ground floor. There's cracks in the walls starting to open up, and I could see daylight. The back door is jammed, so because I was decided, okay, I should get out of here, and so I had to jump over everything, and everything started crashing down. The TV, the bookcase, books, everything just went all over the place. Holes in the walls, and then the kitchen, the dishes and everything was just flying. It kind of looked like The Exorcist, like there's just crashing, bang, everything's going all over the place. But I managed to get out through the front door, and of course, I'm thinking, oh geez, like all my stuff, but there's really nothing you could do about it. So luckily I was in a nice big open car park, and I could see everything around me, and I'm standing behind my car because if there's anything going to fall down, then at least I can duck under the car or something. It's going to give me some protection, And it's bouncing all over the place, and it was so strange. It was like there were waves. The road was wavy, like it was just. But at the time, like, you just don't understand exactly what's going on, or how the extent of it all, And of course, you're not thinking about the ramifications afterwards either. All you're thinking about right now is like, hey, is anything going to fall on me, sort of thing, you know. And my wife's at work, so I was worried about her because she works in a high-rise building in the city, so I'd have to go to the city to find her. That was pretty much all I was thinking about. But, you know, I could see even right next to me there were sinkholes opening up, and like all along the road where I was living, these manholes. The manholes, the shafts, normally underground, of course, but they were coming up out of the ground, and some of them were like 4 feet in the air. I had no idea about the tsunami at the time. This is the first time anything that big had happened while I was. I mean, I'd been there almost 10 years at that time in Japan, and you know, earthquakes were common. They were easy. It didn't really worry me too much. Yeah, it still haunts me today. It still haunts me. Not so much the earthquake. It's sort of like what happened afterwards. It's what haunts me. It's what still today. When I think about the people that I knew and the people that didn't make it, or the people that afterwards, their stories and taking their lives and things like that, it still haunts me today. And so I just wanted to, well, I don't know. I mean, I feel blessed, you know, that I survived this, and I feel blessed that, you know, I love living in Japan. I really do. I think it's a wonderful place. But alright, what happened next after when it did finally stop shaking? Everything was shaking, and you know, like all the power poles around me, none of it actually fell down, but they're all leaning, like some of them on 45-degree angles, and you know, the outside walls of my apartment were crumbling and so on. But then it was like the first thing I had to do as soon as it stopped is I had to go and get my wife. So I jumped in the car and I was trying to get to the city, which was really hard because of, you know, everyone's panicking, everyone's gonna go stock up and try and get everything, because they all knew that, okay, they're going to need to get some stock and all that sort of stuff. I mean, we were fairly lucky that way. We always keep, you know, certain stock at home to, you know, you never know when something's going to happen, like a natural disaster or whatever. But when I finally got to the city, it took me a while because not just the traffic, but because, you know, the roads, the way I usually go, some of the roads, you know, opened up and there were sinkholes, and it was still shaking. You know, like the aftershocks started like almost every minute. I mean, like every minute there was an aftershock, and the aftershocks were not small either. Like the aftershocks, some of them would reach like 8.5 magnitude. Okay, quite many of them were over 8 magnitude, and like some weeks later, it's like a friend of mine, like months later when we got the phone service back, you know, and we still had aftershocks. Like a friend of mine he sent me a text once, and he said, yeah, anything under 7 is not worth getting out of bed for, but it'll still wake you up better than an alarm system, better than like a alarm clock, you know. But it's, yeah, damn true. Like a 7 magnitude is not really worth getting out of bed, but it will certainly wake you up. When I got to the city, you know, it was chaotic, of course, and my wife still wasn't out of the building, which really had me worried, because I could see the first 4 floors of her building were all cracking and crumbling away, you know. And so I was really worried about it. And then when they finally did come out, like everyone came out, and their bosses all took roll call just to make sure everyone was there. They didn't want to miss anyone, you know. So it took us a while to get out of there. And of course, you know, her friends, you know, good friends, we decided, you know, we'd take them home as well. One of them, her kids were at school, and so we diverted and went back, and we picked up her kids from the school as well. Such sweet things. I mean, they were so young, like 5 years old, I think, the young girl, Mika-chan. She's still one of my favorite kids. Absolutely adorable. But yeah, they were so upset. They were so shaken. But you know, they gave me some candy to say thank you, and it was really sweet. But you know, like we couldn't. You know, some of the roads I couldn't actually drive on the road. We had to drive on sidewalks and things like that, because it was just, you know, it was crazy, and it was still shaking. You know, like I said, the earthquakes with these, every couple of minutes, like there was another massive earthquake, like another massive aftershock earthquake, right? So they were just rolling and rolling earthquakes, and driving on it was like those old cartoons where the roads are waving, kind of like this. The bridges were coming apart from the streets, and some of them were like a foot. Like the manholes, some of the manholes were like up to 4 feet out of the road, or out of the ground. But even bridges were like a foot above the streets, and then. Yeah, I dropped everyone off. I dropped my wife off at her parents' place, and I went to check on the school where I was teaching, and you know, the kids that I was supposed to be teaching that day, and the area was underwater, and you know, I was trying to contact you know, the people, just to see what was happening, and of course there was no communications, and so I had to go back home. There was no point going back to my place. My in-laws were just down the road from us, so all I did was I just went home, and I parked the car, and my wife and I, we walked back to her parents' place, and we helped a few people trying to clear a few cars off the road, and yeah, it was like, from then it was like we had no electricity, we had no fuel for the car, we had no fuel for heating. There was, I mean, and the only real noise really we had at the time was just sirens. It was just continuous, like, sirens, you know, ambulances, all the emergency vehicles, everything just going wild. It was just all over the place, all the time, like 24 hours a day. And I mean, it was really hard not to know what was happening to, you know, all the people around us, all the people that we knew, you know, work and everything else. But there was nothing we could do about it at the time. So we just had to get on with what we were doing. We got home and just sort of took inventory of what we had and who we had to look after. And so I had to look after, I mean, myself and my wife, her mother and her grandmother. her father was working. He worked for the city, the waterworks there. So he's an engineer. So we didn't see him for weeks afterwards. Like he just was there 24. He was working like, you know, he had a cot in his office there. He just slept there, and we didn't see him for weeks afterwards. You know, man, he's a machine. He's just an awesome dude. But you know, from that day, like it was like March. It's the middle of March, or you know, the 11th, and you know, it was coming into spring. But that night, it got so cold again. It was freezing cold, and like we had nothing for heating, you know. So I was wearing, I was wearing 2 pairs of pants. I had like some tracksuit pants on and jeans over the top. I had 2 t-shirts on. I had a jumper and an overcoat on, and a beanie and gloves, you know. So I was really rugged up. From like that night, it started snowing again. Like it got so cold, it started snowing again. It felt like the middle of winter again, and I mean, it was kind of, that was a bit of a bonus. Like we started filling buckets with snow, so we'd have water to flush the toilet, so we could use the toilet for at least a couple of days. But you know, another reason why the snow and the cold was a bit of a bonus is there was, I mean, there was just so much going on, really. And they started using like old abandoned buildings for makeshift morgues. And I'll put a photo of like this old bowling alley not far from me. It was, you know, just full of bodies, and those that they could find, you know, just those that they could find. You know, so from there we spent, I mean, I'd love to tell you more. There's got to be, I mean, there's, you know, we spent the next few months just on bicycles, like every day. Like when it got dark, we'd sleep because it got dark early, but because it was so cold. But there was we had nothing for reading or anything else like that. So in that respect, it was kind of good, except we still had these rolling aftershocks. So we were pretty much, every night was like, actually for most of the time I dressed fully. I was fully dressed when I went to bed, or when we were sleeping on the floor, and I was actually sleeping between big pieces of furniture, so that if anything fell on us, we'd have something to break the, you know, when it fell, so it didn't just fall directly on top of us. And so I was sleeping on the floor, like between a table and a lounge chair sort of thing, and I was fully dressed. Like I still had my boots on, because we were up. I mean, it's kind of hard to sleep when you got sirens going off all the time as well. But you know, the aftershocks, you know, like it's pretty hard to sleep after. You know, we were very jumpy after that. You know, it's such a long, big earthquake, and so like these aftershocks, they were very big as well. So we were up and outside again, like 2, 3, even 4, 5 times a night anyway. And then every day we were out on the bicycles trying to find places that would be selling water or food that we could feed the family. And of course, you know, that was pretty much it for months on end. And you know, that all progressed and so on. We did that for a long time, and then when fuel supplies and food supplies started coming back up to where we were living, you know, we got more mobile. Everything gets when we got electricity and gas and water and everything like that. That was like some months later. We started helping people that were further out, whose homes were either gone or just needed cleaning up, so it cleaned up a few places. And I visited shelters. Some shelters, like, went out to a place called Ishinomaki, and they were just kids, like a lot of them were orphans, and they're living in places with no electricity. They got these shelters, they all, even like entire families were just, they had to separate little areas of these cardboard boxes, and then a lot of them, they had to live like that for over a year because there was just nowhere else for them to go. And then they're returning to work, and kids returning to school, and they have to get dressed and everything, like in these makeshift shelters. These mostly sports halls at schools usually. So it was really hard for them. They really did it tough. And so we were taking when we could get food supplies, and we raised a bit of money, and we took blankets and some clothes, and because most of them only had what the military could get from donations, and everything else they lost. Like entire towns were are now sitting at the bottom of the Pacific. Like it's just absolutely devastated, absolutely gone. Like I was talking about, like, I did a video about this Natori last year, actually, when I went back to Japan to see the fish market, to see my in-laws, and I visited the fish market. So you guys should check that video out, because there's a tribute to all the people that were lost there. And the fish market's great, but that whole area was just devastated. Last time I was there, before last year, there were still big fishing boats on the side of the road, and like where there used to be suburbs, all these used to be houses, and it was just absolutely devastated. And these shelters that we drove out to Ishinomaki, the roads were gone. A lot of we were just driving on wooden boards that the military had put down for us to drive on. And we went up into the hills, and we found these shelters, and some of them were just kids, like I said before. But from the top of the hills, you look out into the harbour, and it didn't look like anything had really happened. It was so beautiful, and just. But then when you come down the hill and you drive past where the town used to be, and it's just the debris in the water is everywhere, and on one side and on the other side where the land is, it's just just an absolute mess of debris everywhere. And it was quite shocking to see, like, even like some buildings, it was remarkable. Some buildings would look like they were completely untouched from one side, but if you go around the other side, it's just like it absolutely gutted. But at the same time, everything around it was gone. Like, not even the roads were still there, but this, what's left of this house was still. It looked like, it was just amazing how it worked. It was really weird. But anyway, I just wanted to give people some insight as to what it was like. Today is March 11th, and I just want to say a prayer for Japan. And I know they're still recovering, still rebuilding, and I miss my family over there. I miss my friends, and I miss the people that are lost. And it's the people that died afterwards as well, that they took their own lives because they had lost so much. Like there's so many stories. There's always stories of, tragic stories in these situations where, people have lost entire families, and some of them are just children, orphans it was, another thing is, we live just, like, in Miyagi. Miyagi is where the earthquake actually happened, and then Tsunami was the strongest. But it was just south of us was where the Fukushima power plant was. So most people probably know about the Fukushima power plant, the nuclear power plant. It was devastated and leaking into the ocean. And we were just 70 kilometers north of that power plant. As another thing, like when we did get power back, everyone was, there's little stores and everything they would put up in the windows. They put up today's radiation reading, and the media is always trying to scare us. Like, today's radiation is this, and so on and so on. But like, during that time, like for the first, I suppose it was only for the first 2 weeks, the Australian embassy was harassing us to try and get me on a plane back home to Australia. I mean, I had to pay for it, of course. They weren't going to pay for anything, but they wanted me to get on a bus and go to Tokyo and then wait for the next plane to go back to Australia. And but all I could take was one bag and my wife, and we'd have to leave the family. We'd have to leave my business, my everything, my home, and everything that we had built up there. We'd been living there for 10 years, so there was no way we were going to do that. But they kept harassing us. I told them no, but every day they'd call us. But they never once tried to help. They never brought us any food or water or anything like that. But on the last day, like, they're only there for, I think it was like 7 days or something, so it wasn't that big a deal. But on their last day, they decided they'd bring out one iodine tablet each to help against the radiation, right? But then they pulled out. They pulled out of Japan completely, and like I saw later on, like there was an Australian rescue team there, and I've got nothing against them. I think it's great that they actually came to help. I think that was good, but they're only there for like 5 days. And the Australian news is like, saying, oh, how great these Australian heroes were, that they found this old lady who was buried in this collapsed house in Ishinomaki somewhere. Actually, I think it was Natori. But it was completely untrue. Like, they left the day before she was found. She was actually found by the Japanese military the next day. But the media got hold of it and said, oh, look, these Australian heroes. It's just total BS. So, the Australian embassy, they did nothing at all, actually, for us anyway. And then, like, the next year, it was like 9 months later when I was diagnosed in January for my cancer in Australia. And then when we had to relocate, and I needed a visa for my wife, because the embassy left Japan, my wife had to apply for her visa either in Australia or in Korea. The rule was that she had to apply for it in the country where she was living, but she had to do it through the Australian embassy, and she couldn't do that because they had left. So then she just, says we had to do this in Australia, but because we did it in Australia, it cost us an extra $1,000. And it ended up costing us nearly $7,000 to get a visa. And we just lost everything because of my cancer and because of the year before as well. So we just lost everything we had. So everything we had left, after she had sold everything and gotten rid of everything that we had to, so that we could relocate to Australia. we had to put into her visa, you know. Whereas my visa for Japan, it took me like 3 hours in one morning, and cost me $70 Australian, $70 Australian. But for her, they put her on a 2-year waiting list, you know, here in Australia. It just, yeah, that was crap. But anyway, I digress a bit. So I just want to leave you with some photos, because you know it's really difficult to show exactly what it's like, you know, it's kind of difficult to explain what it's like to live through this kind of situation, and everything that you see afterwards, you know, like cleaning up homes and helping people to survive and get back on their feet, you know. And I just want to say, I sort of ranted on a bit, I guess, but you know, it's I really miss Japan. I miss my friends and family, and it's a wonderful place to live, Japan. It really is. It's very good, and I hope to be able to go back there soon. And so I just want to say a prayer for Japan today, and let them know I'm thinking of them. And you know, every March 11th, it still kind of haunts me. The people that are left behind, the people that we lost, and the event itself, you know, like it's amazing how much your life can change in a matter of minutes, and how much it can, you know, how much stays with you for the rest of your life, you know. So I'll never forget March 11th for everything that we went through, and everything that my friends and family went through, and yeah, so always remember Japan.